Diet sodas, zero sugar yogurts, protein bars, you name it, sugar substitutes are absolutely everywhere. We're kind of sold this idea that they're the secret to having our cake and eating it too, right? But what are these things really? And are they actually good for us? Let's get into it.
I mean, that's the promise that hooks all of us, isn't it? All the sweetness you could want with none of the calories. It sounds a little too good to be true. So in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to investigate. What is the catch?
Okay, so to really understand the risks and benefits, we first have to know who the main players are. Because believe me, they are not all created equal. They actually fall into a few key categories.
First up, the ones you've probably heard the most about, artificial sweeteners. You might also hear them called non-nutritive sweeteners. The key thing to know is that they're synthetic, and our bodies just don't break them down for energy like they do with regular sugar. And that's the whole secret to why they're basically calorie-free.
Oh yeah, you know these. You've seen those little packets at every coffee shop. That blue one, that's aspartame, which you probably know is equal. The yellow one is sucralose, or Splenda. And that little pink packet, that's saccharin, which is sweet and low. You'll find these in just about every diet or sugar-free product out there. And here's why they're so popular in food manufacturing. Get this, they are intensely sweet. Some of them can be up to 20,000 times sweeter than regular table sugar. It's kind of mind-blowing. It means companies only need the tiniest, most minuscule amount to sweeten something up, which is how they keep the calories at practically zero.
All right, let's move on to our next category. This one has a bit of a strange name, but they're super common. Sugar alcohols. And no, despite the name, they don't contain the kind of alcohol that gets you drunk. Not even close. These are a whole different beast.
You'll find these guys, which are also called polyols, in things like sugar-free gum, mints, and a lot of candies. The main difference here is that our bodies partially absorb them, so they do have a few calories, but way, way fewer than sugar. You've probably seen names like xylitol and erythritol on ingredient lists.
And that brings us to our third and final group, a category that has just exploded in popularity recently, the natural and novel sweeteners. These are often coming from plants or are the result of some pretty cool modern food science.
So, for example, stevia literally comes from a plant leaf, same with monk fruit extract. And then you have these novel sweeteners like allulose, which is fascinating. It's a type of sugar that's actually found in nature, but our bodies can't absorb it for calories. It's a neat little trick, and it's what really sets these apart from those purely synthetic sweeteners we talked about first. Okay, so we've met the players. Now for the really important stuff. What do they actually do once they're inside our bodies? Well, the first place we have to look is our gut. It's home to trillions of bacteria, and they play this huge role in our overall health. So here's how it might work. Some research suggests that certain artificial sweeteners, like sucralose and saccharin, don't just pass through our system without a trace. They can actually change the balance of our gut bacteria. And for some people, that change could mess with their glucose tolerance, which basically means their body might not handle real sugar as well as it's supposed to. So let's zoom out a bit. Beyond the gut, what about the things that most of us are really thinking about? Do these things actually help with weight loss? And could they affect our heart health?
There's this really fascinating theory about what's going on in our brains. So your tongue tastes something incredibly sweet, and your brain goes, awesome, calories and energy are coming. But then, with these sweeteners, that energy reward never shows up. The theory is that this might actually confuse your brain and could even make you crave more sweet things later on to get the satisfaction it was expecting. The science is still a little mixed, but it's a pretty compelling idea.
And what about our hearts? This is a big one. It's a question that has been all over the headlines recently, and it was sparked by some research into one specific sugar substitute. So let's take a look at the science behind the headlines. So in 2023, a study published in a major journal really made some waves. It found that people who had higher levels of the sugar alcohol erythritol in their blood also had a higher risk of serious things like heart attack and stroke. And on the surface, yeah, that sounds pretty scary. But, and this is a huge but, science is all about the details. This quote really gets to the core of the debate. Did the erythritol cause the heart problems, or was it that people who were already sick and at a higher risk just happened to have more erythritol in their blood for other reasons? The study showed a connection, a correlation, not confirmed cause and effect, and that is such a critical distinction. Right. Of course, we can't talk about sweeteners without talking about the C word.
For decades, it feels like there have been headlines popping up linking these things to cancer. So let's try to sift through the noise and clear things up. I mean, just last year, this whole debate blew up and in over aspartame. So on one side, you had the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, and they classified it as possibly carcinogenic. That sounds really alarming, right? But they made sure to stress that the evidence was limited. Then, on the other side, the WHO's own expert committee looked at the exact same data and said, nope, we think it's safe at normal intake levels, calling the evidence for cancer not convincing. This is a perfect example of why this stuff is so confusing for all of us. The story of saccharin, that pink packet, is such a great example of how science learns and evolves. Back in the 70s, studies on lab rats led to mandatory warning labels. But then, in the 90s, more research came out showing that the way it caused cancer in rats was very specific to rat biology. It just didn't apply to humans. So by the year 2000, it was officially taken off the US list of potential carcinogens. It's a great reminder that the first headline isn't always the final word.
Okay, so after all that back and forth and all that complex science, what's the actual takeaway? How are we supposed to navigate the grocery store aisle? Let's try to boil all this down into a more practical guide. So let's look at a quick snapshot. Based on everything we know right now, natural sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit seem to have the strongest safety records, with the least amount of disruption to our metabolism. The novel sweetener allulose also looks pretty good and is generally well tolerated. And for the sugar alcohols like erythritol, the consensus is that it's generally safe, but, and here's that key consideration again, it might be wise for people who already have a high risk for heart disease to be cautious until we have more research. So as you can see, there's no simple good or bad label we can just slap on these things. The science is constantly evolving, and honestly, the effects might be a little different for each of us. Ultimately, the question isn't just about avoiding calories. It's about really understanding what we're putting in our bodies and why. So given what we know now, what choice feels right for you?